Hello, I'm Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You're free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You are also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is education, particularly in regards to deconversion issues, atheism issues, biblical studies, and theology in relationship to atheism and Christians for the most part, but I do take on religion in general at times. Today I just wanted to do a video as kind of a post-reflection. Yesterday I spoke to a group of people, the Lake Superior Freethinkers, up in Duluth. They're based in Duluth, Minnesota. I was originally planned to go there and actually speak in person, but COVID-19 happened, and so I've ended up being a little bit sidetracked. So they arranged for me to speak in August instead of June, and ended up speaking via Zoom yesterday concerning both the clergy project and certain other elements. As well as, my own personal story of how I deconverted. And, of course, that's a much more lengthy presentation, and it was a good time. I really enjoyed the company. To be honest, everyone was very friendly. They were very open to a lot of new ideas. There was, of course, people doing what they do always to promote the ideas of free thought. Ran into a fellow Trinity alumnus or grad or attender, one or the other. And so it became one of those sessions where you enjoy doing it. I haven't had that much fun in a while. It's probably testimony of the fact that certain elements of church I still miss. I miss the community. I miss talking about issues. I miss rubbing shoulders with people with like minds, so on and so forth. Except my mind now is a little bit more skeptical and far more non-religious. So it was a good experience, and I want to thank them for giving me the opportunity to speak. It was a wonderful time, and I just wanted to use this video as a way to kind of encapsulate a lot of what was said there. I did go through the history of the clergy project and how it was conceived back in 2006 into its present form in 2020, where we're, well over 1,000 members working on, our next 1,000 probably, and just trying to get things going and move forward with whatever needs to be done. There's a lot of clergy people out there, and I know this may shock some of the believers that watch this channel, but there's a good chance that your pastor doesn't believe any of it, especially if he's a mainline pastor who has had a seminary education. And that's not the product of seminary education, that's the product of the truth of the seminary education and what they present. So it becomes more of an issue for me of just making people aware of that. If anybody came to the clergy project as a result of that experience, if anybody moved forward with their lives as part of that experience, then I guess I've accomplished my mission and goal of being a compassionate anti-theist. Part of this has been about my compassionate anti-theism. One of the great challenges, I think, in the freethinker community is we do have a lot of varied opinions. Atheists really only have one thing in common, and that's the fact that that we don't believe in supernatural or God. Not all free thinkers are necessarily atheists, so I'm good with that. So one of the things that I continue to work on, one of the things I continue to deal with is trying to learn to put myself in the shoes of whoever I'm talking to and see their humanity. And that goes for not just people that are of like mind, but people of all opposite mind. I think if I have any reflection on the event in the past, there's a lot of issues that I heard. Some of them I agree with, some of them I disagree with. There's a lot of sides. I think some of the sides that came up, were, is religious education abusive? Is does religion, constitute abuse when you're like indoctrinating your kids in it? There's other issues that came up regarding race and political issues and things like that, and switching from conservative to liberal and liberal to conservative. If there's one thing I take away from this experience, is because it was very civil, and that's where I think I would hang my hat, is civil discourse. And the reason I have always hung my hat on civil discourse is because the moment you become uncivil is the moment that you're not really going to reach your opponent with any kind of change of mind. I have never changed anybody's mind at the moment of discussion. What I have been able to do is state my case clearly, while at the same time addressing people as human beings. And when you do that, they have a tendency to listen. And the great challenge with a Zoom presentation like that is recognizing that there's a whole bunch of human beings sitting there listening to your very human story. And I tried to be as transparent as I possibly could without outing certain people that, I don't want harmed for various reasons, while at the same time working towards, some mutual understanding and some mutual things. Some of the issues that people bring up, is discipleship abuse. Well, as a discipleship pastor, I want to address that because I think it's a significant issue that I really didn't get to speak at length at. So I'm going to kind of dovetail on that. And I know that there's no way for people to respond to that other than comments, but here's what I want to think about it. As a political scientist, as somebody who has a BS in political science, my issue is, how can you deal with religious teachings of children? Because you can maintain the course that it's abusive, but from a political point, from standard of public policy, would that ever get passed? The one problem you're going to run into is the population of the United States, for instance, has a large belief, whether liberal or conservative, that parents should be in charge of their kids unless they're completely inept. Are you going to cause abusive harm pulling a kid out of a school, out of a home that is loving, caring, takes care of them, provides for all their needs, loves them, they love their parents back, but the only thing that you can see is that their religious instruction includes hell? Are you going to pull them out of the house? That's going to get a political backlash, and that's the problem I have with it. I may very well believe that teaching, on the one hand, that God is a loving God and then that he'll also send you to hell if you don't do what he says, is an abusive mindset. I would agree with that. The question is, are you ever going to be able to stop that with the means of pointing the government gun at somebody's head and saying that's abusive, we have the right to take your kid? See, this is the danger of using the word abuse, because you have to be very specific, and you have to, from a political point of view and a cultural point of view, you have to deal with the issue of, how do I get this past public policy? And there are far too many religious people and far too many people that would say there's no harm being done there, that I don't think you could get it across to people. You can sit there and say it's abusive, and that's fine, but I think you have to prove that case. I think you have to, I think, continue along the course that we have done for the last 10 years. I think a lot of times when I watch the younger generation of atheists, the one thing I see is impatience. You're trying to change the world in one fell swoop. I'm 51. I've gotten too far old to think that I'm going to change the world into the way I would like it by the time of my death. It's not going to happen. What I can do is change what I think and where I go for and what I do every single time, working in what I can touch and what I can actually do something about. I personally think if you want to make the case that religious instruction should wait until somebody is old enough to go after that instruction for themselves, that's a case that can be made, but you're going to have to spend a lot more time attacking religion and religiosity in general. And I don't mean attack in the sense of, go after it and be angry with it. I always love people when they come here because they see the rabid atheist and think I'm going to scream and holler and yell at them, and that just doesn't happen. Every once in a while that comes out when I have a rant, because it just drives me nuts. But I try to keep a very even keel about it because, like it or not, I'm never going to change a couple of parents who are educating their kids in their religious instruction by calling them abusers. The moment I do that, I've shut down all conversation. And that's not the goal. The goal is to get people to understand that what they're doing is bad. And they might not look at it from that way. There's a lot of people that do a lot of bad things to their kids, but don't necessarily look at it as bad. And it would be hard to prove in a court of law that it was bad, too, because we're dealing with belief. And the law in this country has a very reserved tendency to go after religious institutions, even when they do something obviously wrong, because they don't want to end up in a court case with a public relations nightmare of, the government is coming after the church or whatever. So you have to spend a little bit more time, I think, doing the groundwork. And I think that's where I would say, if you want an effective political strategy with getting that across to parents, the first thing you're going to have to do is work on changing the culture as regards to religion, because a lot of people still think religion is a private and sacred matter, and other people should mind their own business, and the government should mind its own business, which, for the most part, as a libertarian atheist, I would say is pretty correct. I think the only recourse you really have there is to sit down with each parent and say, why do you put your kid in this emotional, mental position? To tell them that God loves them, but if they don't do what they say, he's going to send them to hell and burn them with fire up forever. That's a very abusive thing. Also, one other item here. You need to define how this is abuse, and you need to be very, very frickin' specific. You have to be very nail on the head what you're talking about when you're saying that certain religious instruction is abusive. Because if you don't do that, it's going to get laughed out of court. From a legal standpoint, legal people like definitions. And you're going to have to put together more studies and more things and make a legal case that this is the case. And this is the real issue, okay, and the real challenge of this. I've been around long enough, and I've been an observer of atheism long enough, and having come through a very slow and gradual process of turning from a theist to an atheist, I'm going to tell you, you have to take the long view if you want to change society for the better. And you have to really get your ducks in a row. You have to make sure your case is made. And I know it's impatient. I mean, trust me, I don't have anything against the Amish per se, particular, other than one thing. I really think in some cases they really slant the deck of their kids choosing to remain Amish. And it's because the kids just don't know anything else. They've never been told anything else. And there's something inside of me that says, if these kids knew all the facts and could digest all the facts, they might walk away from it and, enter into with the rest of us. A lot of people say, oh, you don't want to mess that up. That's a quaint little cultural thing. Yeah, well, you're causing a bunch of kids to be backwards in their understanding of life and the universe simply because you want your quaint little culture. I think that's probably a little bit deadly there. And I'm not really sure, it's kind of selfish on your part that you want your quaint culture above their betterment and their education. So, I wanted to address that issue because we ran out of time, and I wanted to make sure that there was sufficient time to address it because it was an important question. I guess this kind of leads to how I deal with most issues where I have a disagreement with somebody. The first step for me is always, no matter how vehemently I disagree with somebody, is to look past the disagreement and see the person's humanity. People react far better if you treat them like human beings, no matter who they are. Even police will tell you that the best confessions are when the cop goes in there and treats the perpetrator like a human being. And usually that gets them talking a little bit easier. That's why the good cop, bad cop still works, because the good cop gets the best confessions. And that's true even with criminals, but we're dealing with ideological differences here. I think at that point you're going to have to understand that you may vehemently disagree with parents who educate their kids with a loving God who also punishes people in hell, but you may also have to accept their humanity and the fact that they may not know any better. And they're certainly loving, caring parents, and they just don't know any better. And it's going to take, some time, maybe even years, to convince them that what they're doing is wrong. And you have to do it in such a way that they don't shut you out. And I think that's a better long-term strategy, because the one thing about the law that I can tell you is it takes a long time to get a law passed. It takes a long time for legal action in court systems to take place. It's sluggishly slow in many cases of doing the right thing, and often you still don't get the right thing. With such an issue, you're going to get a political backlash. You're going to get such a political backlash because there's going to be a bunch of people that aren't religious that are going to say, hey, it's none of your business what these people do when they educate their kids about their religion at home. That's their right to do that. And you got to say, okay, how do I get around that? Because that's what I would call political gravity. It's just not going to go away. So you have to figure out how to use the political gravity to get where you're going. Okay, well, let's have a discussion about what that idea does to the psyche of a child. Is that a good thing? And if it's not a good thing, then why do you do it? This is a discussion you can usually have with people that are questioning their faith. But if they're not questioning their faith, it's not something that you're going to be able to do. So I think for me, the long-term strategy has always been to keep my door open, to treat people as human beings, and have an actual discussion about the issue. Now, this goes to one of the rules of this channel, and people have asked me a couple times why I'm so vehement against name calling. Because name calling accomplishes nothing. It is literally the stupidest political tactic as well as being a logical fallacy. Running up and calling somebody who teaches the doctrine of God loving and a God that also sends them to hell as an abuser is going to shut down argument. It's also name calling. You have to demonstrate that that's abusive, and you have to prove that it's abusive. You have to get some psychological evidence that it's abusive. You have to gather it together. You have to write a paper. You have to get it peer-reviewed and published. Lay the groundwork, and then go to that person. Come up with good arguments of why that is so. This is why I've been very reluctant to address this issue, because I'm still working on what arguments I would use. Because I don't want people to just shell up and shut me off, because that doesn't solve the problem. This is a large problem in politics right now. Nobody can sit down and talk with each other. And the immediate thing that I hear every time I say that is, well, if the Republicans would just listen, or the Democrats, neither one of you listen. You're both terrible at listening to the other side. You're complete political ideologues, and then you wonder why nothing gets done, and it becomes a very antagonistic, ugly situation. And that needs to change. I don't know how to change that. I'm still thinking and working about how that would be done. But I do know that it's a detriment to what we need to do. So those are a few issues and takeaways and some things I wanted to continue on with a discussion. And once again, I appreciated the opportunity to speak to Lake Superior Freethinkers. Thank you guys. You were wonderful. You were awesome. It's too bad that I don't live up in the area. I'd probably visit some of your houses with my mask on, of course. But, it's just good to be around people of like mind, even via Zoom. It's good to hear from you, and I hope that my presentation gave you a better understanding of what the Clergy Project does, and through, hopefully, an example of myself. And I appreciate you being along. And I appreciate you coming by the channel today and stopping by and listening to a former preacher turned atheist turned compassionate anti-atheist pontificate about his most recent event. Thank you for that. You're free to like or dislike this video. You're free to comment. You're free to subscribe and follow and do what you need to do. And I hope someday that I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.